Welcome back, travelers. Today we journey to a critical juncture in the history of Westeros. This story is one of ambition and power, where kings clashed with their massive armies only to learn that no crown is eternal, and even the mightiest can fall. This is a tale of how the Lannisters lost their crown and how the Gardeners lost it all. Even today, it serves as a grim reminder that in the Game of Thrones, every king has to contend with the possibility of a greater force waiting in the wings. For more journeys like this, like and subscribe, and let us commence. As Aegon the Conqueror swept through Westeros with fire and blood, the West's two greatest kings made common cause: Loren Lannister, first of his name, and Mern the ninth of House Gardener. Together, they sought to put an end to Aegon Targaryen and his ambitions for Westeros once and for all. After assembling a massive host of his own, King Mern the Ninth marched to unite with King Loren and his Westerland forces at Golden Grove, the seat of House Rowan. Together, the two kings fielded the mightiest army Westeros had ever seen. Their forces combined truly were a sight to behold, 55,000 strong and including some 600 lords great and small and more than 5,000 mounted knights. "Our iron fist," King Mern had boasted in confidence. The King of the Reach rode with his 4 sons and his 2 grandsons at his side. One thing was certain: every man present on the field that day knew a monumental clash was about to transpire. For the two kings, lingering at Golden Grove was not an option. An army this size was to remain on the march before it ate the whole countryside bare. Like a rolling tide of steel and vigor, the host surged north by northeast through open fields of tall grass and wheat. Their goal was singular: to confront the invading Valyrian and put a halt to his conquest. Tidings of their coming reached Aegon in his camp beside the God's Eye. In response, the conqueror gathered his own men and advanced to meet the host gathered against him. Aegon commanded a force a mere fifth the size of his adversaries, with a large part of his host made up of river lords whose allegiance to House Targaryen was both fresh and yet to be tested. Smaller in number, however, Aegon's host could maneuver with a swiftness their foes could not hope to match. When they reached the town of Stony Sept, they were joined by both his queens and their dragons. Rhaenys had flown in from Storm's End, and Visenya from Crackclaw Point, where she had secured pledges of fealty from many of the local lords. The 3 Targaryens watched from the sky as their army crossed the headwaters of the Blackwater Rush in a march towards the south. The stage had been set on the open plains south of the Blackwater, terrain that would one day be marked by the Gold Road. The two kings rejoiced when their scouts returned with reports of Aegon's numbers and dispositions. Aegon was outnumbered 5 to 1, and for knights and lords this disparity was even greater. Additionally, the land was ideally suited for heavy horse, wide open fields of grass and wheat as far as the eye could see. Fortune seemed to favor the two western kings. Aegon did not command the high ground, and they hadn't been troubled by rain, making the land firm and dry instead of muddy. Although it was windy, the day was entirely without clouds. With this knowledge, the kings drew up a plan. With half again as many men as King Loren, King Mern was granted the honor of commanding the center, whilst his son and heir Edmund was given the vanguard. King Loren and his knights held the right flank, while Lord Oakheart held the left. The plan was to sweep around Aegon's lines on both flanks, then strike at his rear, while their iron fist, a great wedge of knights and high lords, would smash a path through the center. Aegon arrayed his own forces in a crescent formation bristling with spears and pikes, archers and crossbowmen just behind, and light cavalry on the wings. The command of his ground forces he entrusted to Jon Mooton, Lord of Maidenpool, as he had been one of Aegon's first foes to move over to his cause. The king himself planned to take wing on his dragon and join the battle from the skies, together with his queens. The absence of rain had not been lost on Aegon Targaryen, and the grass and wheat that surrounded his foes was tall and ripe for harvest, and very dry. The Targaryen host waited for the two enemy kings to sound their trumpets and marched forth under a sea of banners. From the back of his golden stallion, King Mern led the charge against Aegon's center. his son Gawain beside him carrying his banner, the great green hand of House Gardner upon a field of white. Amidst the roar and the screams of battle, and urged on by the horns and drums, the Gardners and the Lannisters pushed through a hail of arrows and charged into their foes, sweeping aside spearmen and obliterating their ranks. By this time, however, Aegon and his sisters had already taken to air. Atop his dragon Balerion, the Black Dread, Aegon cut a menacing figure against the sky, navigating through storms of stones and spears and arrows to swoop down and bathe his foes in dragon flame. His sisters Rhaenys and Visenya set ablaze the dry fields upwind of the enemy and behind them. The dry grasses and wheat caught flame at once, and the wind proved itself an unwitting ally as it fanned the flames and choked the advancing host with thick clouds of smoke. The scent of fire sent the mounts into a panic, the thickening smoke and flame blinding horse and men alike. As walls of fire rose on either side of the western host, ranks began to break, and confidence soon turned to dread and despair. Lord Mooton's archers and spearmen, safely upwind, made short work of the disoriented foes that came stumbling from the roaring inferno. Afterward, men would come to name this battle the Field of Fire. When the fighting was done, more than 4,000 men had perished in the flames, with another 1,000 yet fallen to enemy steel. Tens of thousands of men were burnt in the fires, many of them scarred for life, some so bad that they were rendered entirely unrecognizable. Among the dead was King Mern, as were his sons, grandsons, brothers, cousins, and all other kin that had been on the field with him that day. Only one nephew managed to cling on to life for 3 days, but when he as well died from his burns, House Gardner died with him. King Loren, however, managed to escape, racing through flame and through smoke and to safety after witnessing the futility of the fight. In stark contrast, the losses on the Targaryen side were minimal, as they lost no more than 100 men in the fray. Queen Visenya had taken an arrow to the shoulder but swiftly recovered. As the dragons feasted on the dead, Aegon ordered the swords of the slain collected and sent back to the Aegon fort. The day after, King Loren was captured. He laid down his sword and crown at Aegon's feet and bent the knee. In a display of magnanimity, Aegon lifted Loren back to his feet and accepted his surrender, confirming him in his lands and titles as Lord of Casterly Rock and Warden of the West. Lord Loren's bannermen followed his lead and bent the knee to Aegon, as did many of the Lords of the Reach who had survived the dragon flame. Aegon's conquest of the West remained incomplete, however, and so he parted with his sisters and swiftly advanced towards Highgarden before it could be seized by some other claimant. He arrived to find the castle overseen by Harlan Tyrell, a steward from a house loyal to the Gardners for generations. Without a fight, Tyrell yielded the keys to Highgarden and swore his fealty to Aegon. In gratitude, Aegon bestowed upon him Highgarden and all its domains, naming him Warden of the South and Lord Paramount of the Mander, and granting him dominion over all of House Gardner's former vassals. Thus concluded the Field of Fire, a battle characterized by an unprecedented scourge of Dragonfire that marked a turning point in Aegon's conquest for Westeros. Yet, more than a battle, the Field of Fire had been a message, signaling to all rulers the folly of meeting dragons on the field with conventional warfare. This demonstration of fire and blood, for which the Targaryens would become infamously known and feared, helped solidify their place in the annals of Westeros, ushering in the new era of the kings of the House of the Dragon. Thank you for watching, friends. For more videos like this, like and subscribe, and may you all fare well.